And welcome back to another episode of All the Cars I've Owned. And the intriguing thing about this particular episode is this has Welcome back to another episode of All the Cars I've Owned. And in this episode, we're going to talk about the car I'm actually sitting in. I've been using it as a prop for all the past videos in this series, and I figured now's the time we can uncover the mystery of why I bought it and how I bought it. And, well, let's get on with it. So, in my hand is an original Mazda Miata brochure from 1994. And that's what we're sitting in. So this is a 1994 Mazda Miata Package C. And in that package, it basically included all the power features, all the luxury features that were offered for this model, with a few exceptions. This one is, it's in its original color. So this was, I forget what the exact color code is for this red, but actually this brochure might tell me. Let's take a look. Classic red. So this one is in classic red with beige leather interior. And being a package C, it has the rear luggage rack. It has a factory stereo with AM/FM cassette and bass transducers mounted inside the seat backs. And when I bought the car, that actually still worked. I took the factory stereo out and I installed a modern stereo to so that I could actually use my Bluetooth features on my phone and such. I still have the original stereo. It can be bolted in at any time. Nothing's permanent. It has the 1.8 liter. Being a 1994 model, it has the 1.8 liter engine, which is it's basically the 1.6, but I believe it's bored out a little bit, and that's really about it. Same basic engine though. It has the factory alloy wheels, which were part of the Package C option list. It's got power windows, power mirrors, no power door locks, and the Torsen limited slip rear differential, which is a fairly coveted option on these NA Miatas. And of course, it's a 5-speed manual. But what it does not have is the optional ABS brake system. And, oh, yes, it has power steering and AC. Those two were actually optional. But the Package C had pretty much all of those things. And I believe this car may have sold new for a little over like $20-some thousand or so, like $20,000 to $21,000. So let's talk about why I bought this car. So prior to the end of the summer of 2016, I was an avid motor scooter enthusiast, and I had owned several motor scooters. I started out with a Chinese-made 2-cycle 50cc, putt-around little thing. I bought it for $600 used, and I did some work to it, got it running, and I rode it around town a little bit, but I realized it was way too small. And the only way for me to enjoy two-wheel life was to get my license and buy something bigger. So, in the great state of New Hampshire, to get a motorcycle license, all you've got to do is go over to the DMV, you take a written test, you get the study materials first. You study those as thoroughly as you can. You go back and you have to pass a written exam. It's a very short exam. Then you're eligible for a road test. So at that point, I was able to grab. I could ride any motorcycle as long as it was during certain hours of the day. And the caveat is, or the loophole is, it has to be something that classifies as a motorcycle based on the laws at the time. So that means I was able to buy a 150cc Honda Elite and practice driving on that, and I was able to take the road test on that bike as well, on that scooter. Now the road test, or the road course, is a very short. You basically, the instructor observes you as you run through a little maze and stuff, and you've got to do things. You can't stall it. So, being a Honda scooter, it had a CVT transmission, so I couldn't stall it if I tried. Anyway, so I passed my road test, I passed my written test, and I was now a registered motorcycle driver or operator. So, anyway, I progressed through the engine sizes up to about a 7 or 600cc Honda Silverwing by the time 2016 rolled around. Prior to that, I'd put about 30,000 miles on a Honda Helix, and that was those are some of the best days of my life, riding that thing around. The 250 highway legal scooter. I drove it to Boston from New Hampshire. I drove it to Framingham, Mass. One time. I've driven it to Vermont. I've gone as far as Maine. I had so much fun on that bike. 30,000 miles. So then I got a little bit bored with the 250, so I bought myself, for about $4,500, I went to the Honda dealer and bought a used 2007 Honda Silverwing 600, which is the biggest scooter Honda ever made. The Silverwings are kind of hard to find, so I was looking at private listings and I was looking at dealer listings, and they happen to have one. And it had 7,000 miles on it. So I just had, it was 10 years old, so I had them do fork seals, a belt, front tire, and a few other odds and ends. And they agreed to it for the price they were asking, and I bought it and drove it home. I managed to put about 1,000 miles on that scooter in the 1 week I owned it, until one day I was out getting a coffee while I was at work, and I got T-boned by an SUV. The injuries I suffered were relatively minor considering what could have happened. I broke my left leg. I broke my left leg in two places. Basically just broke the tibia and fibia like that. So, I'm not going to get into the details of the accident or any of that, but one thing I will say though is when you break your leg as an adult, what they'll often do is they'll perform what's called an IM nail procedure, or intermedullary nail. And what it is they ram a titanium rod right through whatever bone is broken, and they bolt it in place. And what that does is it supports the bone internally while it heals, and allows you a much quicker recovery. And basically, I was told right after the surgery, I was told that I could essentially walk out that room if I really wanted to, but it was so painful. There was no way that was happening. Spent a week in the hospital recovering, eating crappy food, and I was home for about 1.5 months before I was able to return back to work. And it was a rocking good time, I'll tell you. But that experience basically eliminated any desire for me to ride on two wheels again, and there was no way I was getting back on my bike. The insurance company, they took care of me. They paid my medical expenses. That was a lot of money, but they took care of the medical expenses, and I got, they paid me for the bike that was ruined, and they gave me a little bit extra for pain and suffering, essentially. So with the money that I got, I had some money to play with, and I spent most of my time recovering just to keep my mind off the injury. What am I going to do next, I'm not buying another bike. So what's the next best thing? And I decided that a convertible would be the next best thing. And a convertible would double as a spare car if my main daily driver ever got damaged or needed major work. So it was like, motorcycle, I can't... So motorcycles, they're a nightmare to drive in the rain. You have to really be careful when, after it rains, the roads can be slippery. You've got to worry about other drivers that can't see you because you're so small. You've got to worry about a lot of things. But there's nothing that can replace the feel of just you, two wheels in the open road. There's nothing on planet Earth that can replicate that. But a convertible gives you at least the open air concept, the open air driving, it gives you that much anyway. And depending on what kind of convertible you buy, it's also a nice toy to play with, on the weekends and just have fun in. So I looked at a couple of different convertibles after I recovered and was ready to buy something. And I was looking at BMWs, I was looking at Mercedes-Benz's, older ones, nothing newer. They didn't give me that kind of money. But I was looking at a lot of different options, and I was a major reader of Jalopnik, and I still am. And I watch a lot of YouTube videos on, basically automotive subjects and such. And I decided that buying a BMW would be a mistake because what I was looking at were Z3s and Z4s. The Z3s have a lot of major engineering faults, and you couple that with an aging BMW that's now over 15 years old or so. Most of them are over 20 years old. And you've got a recipe for disaster, really, a financial disaster, because they've got one major problem where the differentials will shred off the mounts. They basically bolted tinfoil to the trunk pan and then attached the differential to that and called it good. No, that's like not cool. That is a legitimate problem with the Z3 BMWs. The differentials will fall out. What got me onto BMWs is a good friend of mine actually owns a 96 Z3. She let me borrow her car because I told her I was thinking about buying one. So she's like, well, why don't you take mine for a week? So I did. I drove it around and I loved it. I really did, but the Z3 it's just not a great car. I mean, as they get older, this one had, the seat track was like loose, so every time you accelerated, it would clunk back. It's a known common problem and is fixable, but there was the constant creaking and groaning of the chassis. The engine wasn't really all that powerful. It's a 1.9 liter in that one. She had the 1.9 liter version. It's a fairly heavy car. It felt like it anyway. But I decided against the Z3, and I looked at Z4s, and they have problems with the convertible top motors. They'd fill up with water, and they would rust out. So I'm like, yeah, maybe not that. And then I started thinking about Miatas. Now I started out looking at newer Miatas, something in the $10,000 and below range, for something, in the mid-2000s. During peak Ford era, when they were really not that desirable, so the values they're a little on the lower side. But there seems to be a lot of them out there, especially in my area. So I was looking at a couple of those. I found one that was totally rotted out, and because it turns out steel that Mazda used from that time period had a tendency to corrode without any real reason to. So I looked at a few more, and I wasn't really liking what I saw. So then I'm like, well, what about an NA Miata? Now the NA Miata is the first generation from 1989 to 1997 or so. And those are the first, the first Miatas ever produced, and they're the most collectible. And what I'm finding with the NA Miatas is either you find one that's very affordable, but totally rusted out, or needs major work, or has stupid high miles, or you find one that's quite expensive, but mint condition. You know, and I was looking at, okay, if I buy one that I have to fix up, I'm going to be spending the rest of my life repairing the car and putting money into it. And I don't want that. I don't want to go back into that again. I've been there. If you've seen my video series, you know what I'm talking about. I've done this before. I'm not doing it again. So I started looking at some of the listings that I found. I was looking on Bring a Trailer. I looked in local classifieds like Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace. And I found some that were intriguing to me, but they were modified. You know, I found some nice low-mile examples that had aftermarket turbochargers or aftermarket wheels and aftermarket this. And you just know a car like that hasn't been pampered, hasn't been babied its whole life. So you're going to buy something that somebody probably had a lot of fun in and didn't quite take good care of it necessarily. And I was looking at this from the proposition of whatever car I buy, I will never sell it. I'm just going to keep whatever I buy. So I want to buy the best one I can find that's not so expensive that I just won't do it, you know. Anyway, so after some soul searching, I found one. Okay, I found this one car. It was a low mileage, like probably 30,000 mile, 1995 Ultra Base. No power steering, no AC, no power windows, and it had steel wheels on it. So I called the person who was selling it, and they had just sold it. And it went for quite a bit of money for a car that age. But then again, we're talking about a first generation Miata, and they are getting expensive in good condition. So I scrapped that one. I've always had a thing for these cars since I was a little kid, especially with the steel wheels. There's something about those steel wheels that makes it look authentically retro, and it's just a very good look for these cars. And finding one with those steel rims already on it was going to be, you know, that would have been ultimately great. But anyway, I was still looking, and then I found one. It was in '94. It was actually this car, so I'll just clear that up right now. It was this actual car, and it was parked. I remember the listing photo. It was beautiful. It was parked on like a golf course, and the car was pristine. The photos were amazing. And I looked at it, and I looked at it, and I'm like, this is the car. This is the one I'm going to buy. He wanted a lot of money for it, and I won't say how much. He wanted $8,000. No, wait. I think he wanted more than that. I think he wanted $8,500 for it. I'll just come out and say it. He wanted $8,500 bucks. So I'm like, that's not going to happen, pal. That's a lot of money. So anyway, I called the guy up, and he seemed legitimate. He had owned it. He was telling me that he owned several Miatas, and he was trying to thin the herd out because he just needed the money at this point. And this is the one he didn't want to sell. He bought the car. He said he bought the car to. He was looking for one to turn into a performance vehicle. You know, upgrade suspension, turbocharger. You know, just go through it and make it into something, you know, that would be track worthy. And he bought this one, and he brought it home. He got it from a guy in Vermont, or an old woman in Vermont. Classic old lady owned it story. Yeah. So he bought the car, and he brought it home, and as he was looking it over, he realized how original and unmolested the car was, and he just couldn't get himself to do it. He's like, I can't take this car and start chopping it up and hopping it up, because it's one of the few unmodified, fully loaded Miatas left. And he's not wrong. I haven't found another one like it. And I'm still looking for another one with these options in this condition, just to see how many are out there. And I haven't found any. And he knew that these were starting to go up in value, which is why he priced it to the moon and back, hoping to get all the money for it. And so anyway, I told him, I'm not comfortable giving you your asking price, but I'd love to see the car and talk to you. Maybe we could work something out. Okay, great. So I drove to his shop. Now, the shop that he was working in was it was a historical building. I didn't realize this until I showed up, but it was a historical building in New Hampshire, and it was full of some very, very high-end cars. So he brought me into his shop to show me the car. So we walk in through the side door, and immediately I'm walking into like this old converted. It looked like an old horse, like a very nice horse barn. It had a brick herringbone pattern floors, beautiful woodwork. I mean, this guy was legitimate. I mean, this was not some jackass scrapping Miatas for money and selling them as unrebuilt, beautiful cars. This guy knew his stuff. His shop had, we're talking Bentleys, Rolls Royces, not newer ones. I mean, antiques, beautiful antique, like brass era cars. These beautiful cars. He had some American vehicles. He had German. He had this beautiful Mercedes in there. I don't know what model it was. It was too much for me to take in. And I've been in car museums. This was more than I could take in. I'm like, what the hell do you do? And so it turns out he was in charge of basically the day-to-day operations of this. It was a privately owned collection, and he was the guy who took care of the collection. He took care of the building, the cars, and he also ran a body shop in the building that took in, and he didn't do like Honda Civics. We're talking like rare, one-off, classic vehicles with historical connections, and he would restore them back to factory. And some of the vehicles that I saw in this building were vehicles that I had read about on online news articles. And if I say too much, you'll figure out who the guy is and what he does. But we're talking like legit celebrity-owned stuff here. But I was just blown away. I'm like, what the hell? And you're selling me a Miata? What? So anyway, he took me to where this car was sitting. It was he had a private garage in that shop, and it reeked of gasoline. Something in that shop was leaking gasoline. It was awful. So I'm walking in, and immediately I'm like, ugh, great. Maybe the car leaks gas. I don't know. But I'm looking around, and he's got Corvettes. He's got a black Lamborghini, a modern day Lamborghini. He claimed it was like only a few of them ever made, and he was just waiting for the value to go up even higher so he would sell it for a huge profit or something like that. But and in that garage was this car. So I looked it over, and I verified that the engine was cold, and it's like he understood why, because you don't buy a used car from anybody with a cold engine. You don't do that. You listen to that engine when it's dead cold. That way you know you're looking for any signs of oil consumption. If it starts to blow blue smoke out the exhaust, generally vehicles with weak valve seals will do that when they're cold. Once they're warmed up, they're fine. You're listening for engine noise, knocking, lifter noise, anything like that. And so I had him start it up. He hooked up a jump pack to it, fired right up, and he had his son drive it out to the other side of the building. So he walked me back through the shop, and my jaw's dropping like, oh my God. He claims to have met Jay Leno. because he does a lot of automotive auctions, like Gooding and what's that big auction? Usually Barrett-Jacks. He's involved in those types of cars too. Allegedly, he has actually met Jay Leno, and I wouldn't be shocked because Jay Leno is not shy. I mean, he loves other car guys. He's not a snob like that. But so I wasn't really impressed by that. But okay, great. So anyway, we're looking at the car out in the parking lot, and I'm noticing, it's got some, the paint isn't perfect. It's got some whirl marks on it. But what I was looking for is the paint faded? Because these cars were painted in a single stage that's no clear coat finish. And they do require a lot of TLC to keep them up. And unfortunately, because these cars were lower end cars, they weren't sold as high-end vehicles, the people who bought them didn't know how to take care of the paint. They didn't know how to keep them up. And so a lot of the older Miatas just ended up going to hell. That's why you see them rolling around with torn up tops and, faded paint, a lot of rust. And that's just the unfortunate life of a Miata. I mean, it's basically a Mazda 323 with a convertible body on it. I mean, it is what it is. But what makes the Miatas unique is that when they were designed from the ground up, they were designed to perform. They were designed to be more capable than most of the owners would ever treat them. I mean, you can track a Miata. It may take a few modifications to do it right, but you can throw these suckers into corners, and they'll take it. They have a very, very sophisticated suspension system for what they are. I mean, the base Miata was like $16,000, or way back in 1990. So, they were never expensive cars, but they were definitely more capable than most of the hairdressers, and that's the stereotype. It's a hairdresser's car would ever put them through, But then people realized, wait a minute, these cars aren't just cute. They actually do perform, and they're not fast. But anyway. So I looked the car over, and I really loved what I saw. It had factory floor mats. It's got, the seats are in perfect condition, with the exception of a few wear marks. They're in perfect condition. The dash isn't cracked. There's no fading. There's no damage. It's like somebody bought the car and stuck it in a garage its whole life. And it had 54,000 miles on the clock. It wasn't the lowest mile example, which is a good thing, which means that it was actually driven occasionally. A lot of these cars, you can still find a Miata with 20 to 30,000 miles on it. But that's a car that sat its whole life. A car that's been driven moderately is better than one that's not been driven at all, because the car that hasn't been driven, you're going to have oil leaks, suspension problems. I mean, it's just going to have a lot of issues. It's cool to have one that has no miles on it, but it's definitely not the greatest thing ever. But I looked it over, and I was very happy with the way the car was preserved. The undercarriage was clean as a whistle. It had no signs of any collision damage, but I did notice some paint. Some of the paint had been redone, but let's take a look. So you can clearly tell that some of the paint has been done. This fender's been painted, and there's a little bit of overspray in here. You can actually see on this hood bump stop here, there's a little bit of overspray. So the hood's definitely, more than likely, been painted on the top. The rear bumper's been painted, and the trunk lid's been painted. So I knew that the car had some work done. I just didn't know to what extent it was. The wheels, I mean, look at these wheels. I mean, they've never been painted. This is the factory finish. All four wheels look just like this. And that's a good sign. It tells me that the car has never seen a winter's day. It's never been driven on a salty road. And that's what kills these cars in New England. They're known for a few other problems. one issue is the rain rail. There's a very thin plastic tray that goes behind the convertible top, and what that does is it diverts the rain that leaks down the back of the top, and it drains it out through these drain holes here. One of the best things you can do to one of these cars before you buy it is to put the top up, put the windows up, and spray water from a garden hose. And you want to look on each side, and what you're looking for is a nice, perfectly round water stream that comes down from either side. That tells me that the drains aren't clogged, because when they clog up, the water will back up and wind up in the rocker panels, and that rots them right out, whether they're New England cars or Florida cars. So I was looking for things like that, Okay, is this car just some piece of crap that somebody tarted up and put it up for sale for stupid money? No, it wasn't. This is a car that somebody bought, took care of, and drove it occasionally. And that makes it one of the more desirable first-generation Miatas. So I was actually looking after doing some very light homework. I found that the 94 was the year to get, because it has the 1.8 liter motor, and it has the now this is another thing, is the airbag control modules. They always fail in these. The airbag control module in the 94 is located under the steering column. It's easy to get to, and I knew it was bad before I even looked at the car. And I told the guy what was wrong with it. He never mentioned the airbag light. He said it was never really a problem, but when he started it up, it came on. So I'm like, well, yeah. Well, what happens with the control modules is there's 4 large capacitors that always fail in them, and they act as a battery. What they're supposed to do is, if the ignition's cut off, they're supposed to store enough charge to fire the airbag in a collision. And so that's the problem, and I think it blinks 4 times. So I told him, I can fix that, not a big deal. But the 95, 96, 97, the module is located right over here under the dash, and you can't get to it. The only way to get that replaced or repaired is to pull the entire dashboard out of the car. So the 94, you've got the improved airbag system, you've got in the repairable one, and you've got a 1.8 liter engine versus a 1.6, and you've got this cross brace in the rear, which stiffens the chassis substantially. But for the most part, it's basically the same car as the previous generation. Oh, one more thing. There's additional bracing in the rear end. So the 94 is what I wanted. This guy had one for sale, and it was in mint condition. It had never had any major service done. It had 54,000 miles on it. So I was basically buying a unicorn. And get some light here. But I knew that I was no way I was going to give him his asking price. So we negotiated down quite a bit, and I ended up getting the car for around $7,500, which is still a lot of money for one of these. But I figured there's no way I can lose at that price. And if I never sell it, it's not a big deal. So this is what I was facing. This car was in better condition than the newer ones I was looking at. I looked at an 03, I looked at a 2010, and this car was somehow in better condition than both of those. All the seals were supple and intact. The top, take a look at this top. This is the factory original top. No rips, no tears, no cracks, nothing. The rear window is in good condition. It's hazy, but I can live with that. But the top is in amazing condition. And I believe it is the original. The window itself was made by the original manufacturer who made these tops. So if this top was ever replaced, it was done with a factory top. It's a Wopaven, which is a German company that makes convertible top windows. And the zipper inside has the Mazda logo on it, or it says MX-5 or something like that. So I found a vehicle that there's no way I was ever going to get one for a better price and better condition. So despite its age, I did give him, the $7,500 that we agreed on. Now, it wasn't that easy of a transaction. In fact, it almost ended tragically. So what I ended up doing was, and I didn't give him all the money up front. I gave him a down payment or a deposit. And I said I'd be back to pick it up, later that week, because I needed another driver. So I took down the information. I got the VIN number. I got the bill of sale, and I was on my way home. I pulled off to get some lunch, and I opened up the Carfax app on my phone. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to buy this car until I run a Carfax on it. It's just the smart thing to do. So I paid the $30-some fee, and I ran a Carfax on it, and my heart just sort of sank. The Whopper just fell out of my mouth. I was not happy with what I saw. His story didn't fully add up. He claimed it was a one-owner car from Vermont. The only thing he got right was the car was indeed from Vermont. It spent most of its life in north-central Vermont, and that's about all he got right. But it had been actually through about 5 owners before I got it. And it was in an accident in 2006. He didn't tell me any of that. So what I ended up doing was I was a little pissed off, and I was a little upset. So I called the guy up, and I said, you know what? I'm just want to get your input on this. And I wasn't mean about it. I said, look, you said one thing, Carfax says another. Can you corroborate any of this? Do you know about an accident? I mean, I'd like to know this. I'm spending a lot of money on this car, and I want to make sure that it's not some, whatever. And I was trying to be nice about it, and the guy just gave me a wicked attitude, and rightfully so, I guess. If he didn't know about this, I would be pretty pissed too. I'll say this much. He sounded like he knew what he was doing as far as, restoring cars, but he didn't seem very tech savvy. He didn't strike me as the kind of guy who would have ever even looked at a Carfax report. He just isn't that kind of guy, and I could tell right off because he barely knew how to use email. And so that I wouldn't have been surprised if he had never pulled a Carfax on it. But he didn't really know the vehicle's history, or he thought he knew it, but yeah. Anyway, I don't want to judge the guy too badly, but I was a little pissed. So he said, why don't you come down and you look at the car again, and if you don't want it, I'll give you your deposit back. I said, that sounds fair. It was a little more heated than that, but I'm just trying to clean it up for my audience here. So I drove back. The collision report, or the information reported to Carfax, is it was in a rear-end collision. And that makes sense, because if you let's look at a couple of things here. If you look at the trunk lid, this is not an original trunk lid. It is a Mazda replacement trunk lid. It is a factory replacement, but it is not original to the car. Clearly, it's been off the car before, at least once. And it's been painted. I mean, look at it. It's clearly been painted with the factory style single stage paint, which is nice. Kept it original. But it's been off the car. And you look at the bumper. This is the only panel. So the trunk lid and the rear bumper are the only panels that do not have the factory VIN tag on them. The front clip, the fenders, both are all that's original. And you can see factory VIN tag here on both fenders, on the hood, and the front clip. So it was never in a front end collision. It's been painted, but that's it. But the rear end, the bumper skin, and the trunk lid do not have the factory tags on them. But if you peel the carpet back, I'm looking for things like you know, has the body sealer been tampered with? You can see something is rubbed up against this, probably the jack or something, but it doesn't look like it's ever been on a frame straightener, or it's never been pulled out. So based on this, I ended up buying the car, and you know, I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't buying something that had been salvaged. You know what I mean? But it looks pretty clean in here. The one thing I did notice is it had the wrong battery in it when I bought it. So the battery had actually come loose and dented the quarter panel like that. So that definitely happened. And that was because they had the wrong battery in there. But everything else checked out fine. It still has all the carpet padding. It's got the spare tire, the jack, the handle, everything. It's all here. These are mouse repellent packets, by the way, in case you're wondering. But it looks clean inside. There's no rust, no rodent damage. I mean, so I couldn't turn it down. I said, you know what? I'll give you what we agreed on. I'm never going to find another one like this again. I looked underneath. Everything is perfect. So it was like, there's no way I'm turning this car down. Not for that kind of money. And I'll never find another one. And to this day, I haven't. Because I'm always still looking. What else is out there, and how are the first generation Miatas faring price-wise? It's become a second hobby of mine. So after I bought the car, I went through it. I did all the deferred maintenance stuff that it needed. I pulled the valve cover, timing belt covers off, did the timing belt tensioner, water pump, thermostat, radiator, timing belt gasket. It had one oil leak, and it was the camshaft angle sensor was leaking, so I bought the O-ring for that. I did an O2 sensor. I did all the radiator hoses, clutch, master, slave. The slave cylinder started leaking shortly after I bought it, so I did both. I did the brake fluid flush. I brought it to the dealer, and I had the transmission oil changed and the differential oil changed. I actually supplied the oil. I had them use the Motorcraft stuff that people seem to like a lot on these, so they did that. I only had the dealer do those two because you need to get it up on a lift to get it done right. I did the fuel filter myself, which is a bitch to get to, but I did that. So I kind of went through the car. I put a new stereo in it. I kept the original stereo. It's in a box over there. New door speakers. I actually bought the speakers from a gentleman who was at one of the Miata shows I went to, and he has custom speakers that are made to fit the mount holes. A lot of times, see, these have a unique screw pattern for the door speakers. So a lot of people drill new holes. I didn't want to drill any holes in the car, so I had the custom speakers put in. They're polycone, really nice little speakers. I also put in the rain guards, the foam, like a foam bucket behind the speaker to protect it from rain. So I did that. I put a new stereo. I think I just mentioned that. I rebuilt the airbag control module, and I had one modification, and that is I put these lights in. These are an accessory that you can buy from Moss Miata. All NA Miatas have dummy plugs on either side of the center stack. I'm not really sure what they're for, but some genius had the idea of making custom lights that can mount, because when these are new, the only interior light is right here on the NA 94 and up. The original Miata, the 89 to 93, they have a light here. So they did a little bit of changes there. At this time, I've got 63,841 miles in the odometer, and it's been one of the most reliable cars I've ever owned. I have never had a problem with this vehicle. After doing all those, maintenance things, sometimes these convertible latches, they act up. You just got to re-lubricate them every once in a while so that they click in first time, every time. But anyway, this car is just in fantastic condition for its age. It's a 94, so it's 25 going on 26 years old. But, I'm glad I bought it. I mean, my girlfriend and I, we take this thing out all the time. We, in the summer, spring, summer, fall, we go on a lot of cruises, and we have a lot of fun in this car. It's just a nice car to drive around in. I forgot I had this CD. I better get it out of there. Let's see if it'll eject with the ignition off, because I don't have the key with me. Oh, there it is. No, I need to turn the ignition on. Oh, there it goes. Anyway, so, yeah. No. But yeah, so that's kind of how I got the car, why I bought this car, and my future plans are pretty simple. I mean, this car, I am not modifying it. I'm not going to put any turbos on it or anything stupid like that. But what I will do, it's probably due for an exhaust. It still has the factory exhaust system on it. So I might have to do an exhaust at some point. But I am going to put 4 tires on it, maybe this year. These tires are still good. They're just terrible. They're really not good tires. They're kind of chintzy. They're very old. I'm not even sure what the date is on these, but they're definitely, these tires are approximately maybe 10, 11 years old. To give you an example, and look at these brakes. I don't think they're original, but look at them. They're not even rusting. They look perfect. Yeah, there's still plenty of meat on those pads. What do their fronts look like? I haven't even looked at this in a while. Let's see what their front brakes look like. Oh yeah, they're fine. This car has never not passed inspection. But you look inside, I mean, where the major rust usually occurs, this thing is solid. I mean, yeah, you're going to have some light surface rust on a few parts like that, but I mean, that's just normal. But all the stickers are still in the hood. Yeah, I did plugs and wires too while I was in there. So those are all new. As of 2000... When did I do that? 2018. Oh, the dates are right there. Yeah, 7/6 of 18 is when I did the timing belt. And that's supposed to be done every 60,000 miles or every 5 years or so. But one of the great things about this engine, though, is it's a non-interference motor, so if the belt breaks, it won't hurt it. It'll just coast to a stop, and then you just put a belt on it when you get it back into a garage. So what else is there to say about this car? I mean, yeah, so I am going to be doing tires. I'm going to be doing a front-end alignment. It definitely needs an alignment. Oh, yeah, the air filter that was in this car was in... So I bought the car in 2018. The air filter had a date code of 1999, and it was still good. So, again, this is a vehicle that just hasn't seen a whole lot of road use. It has been parked most of its life and pampered, really. But, yeah, it doesn't have the optional anti-lock brakes. Now, here's another thing. So, if this car had ABS, the module would be over there. And the windshield washer fluid bottle would be right here. That's why this hole is here. So that would be there if it had ABS. But it doesn't. So. And this is supposed to be clipped into here. The little... Ugh, see if I can get my hands down in there. That's supposed to be clipped in right there. I can't get my hands in there to do it. But... yeah, she's a good car. Everything works. Never had a problem. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you all for watching, and our next video will be the last. It will be the last video we make in this series. I can't wait to put this whole series behind me, but I'm glad I'm doing it because I'm having a lot of fun talking about cars. It's more exciting than talking about a 20-year-old computer. Oh yeah. So I'm going to be bringing this car in the springtime to a local auto detailer. I want to have this car buffed properly. It would do it so much justice. I'm going to prep the car by pulling the trunk mounted luggage rack off, and I'm going to let them do their thing. Somebody who's experienced with a DA buffer needs to give this car some love badly. You know, single stage paint is high maintenance, but if you do it wrong, you ruin it. Like, there's a lot of spotting here. All of that will buff out. There are no scratches or chips. There's a few chips, but I've touched them up a little bit. I'm going to have them go through this. I'm going to take the nozzles off. I'm going to get new nozzles. These are actually, well, one of them, the clips are busted off of it. So I'm going to put new nozzles on it. I'm going to have to order those. But yeah, I'm going to have it totally buffed. I'll take the badges off. Or maybe I won't even have to. But I want it done right. I want it to look brand new again. And I know it can. This paint is good. This paint is really good. It's not fading. It's not thinned out. I think it's doable. And I think this car would look absolutely spectacular if that were done properly. And while they're there, I'll have them do a full exterior detail. Maybe not the interior. I don't want to pay for that. I do my own interior detailing. But it'll be good to see what it looks like, you know, properly buffed. I might even pull these brackets off just to make it a little bit easier for them. But they know what they're doing, so I'll let them do their thing. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and hope this video was somewhat entertaining. This was actually a viewer request, but I couldn't do it until it was in sequence, so thanks again.